After recently watching the documentary Beastie Boys Story, which covered the history of the Beastie Boys, I became fascinated with Rick Rubin, the producer who's behind the Beastie shift from punk rock to hip-hop. Admittedly, my pre-2000s knowledge of hip-hop culture is minimal, and for this, I only knew of Rick Rubin as the owner of the Shangri-La studio space and the producer with an otherworldly mystic persona that was beyond Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP2 and the revamping of Kanye West's Yeezus. After watching the documentary, I came to know Rubin as the founder of Def Jam Records, who shaped the sound of early hip-hop through this imprint and its production work. After the success as a hip-hop pioneer, he left Def Jam in 1988 and started another label, Def American Records, which was quickly named to American Records. Since then, Rubin has continued his label work while leading a legendary streak of production both in and out of hip-hop. As part of my exploration of Rick Rubin, I watched another documentary, Shangri-La, which details Rubin's life in the studio of the same name. Remember how I mentioned that Rubin's second label was renamed from Def American Records to American Records? This was briefly glossed over in the documentary, but it's probably the most fascinating part of it. The renaming happened because of a funeral that took place on August 27th, 1993. Said funeral was inherently sacrilegious, as it was not for a person, but a word, with that word being deaf. It was known as the death of Def. Although Def is obviously short for definitely, its importance to hip-hop may not be common knowledge today because it was pronounced deceased nearly 3 decades ago. Def's first known use on record was in 1979 with Big Bang Hank of Sugar Hill Gang rhymed on the hip-hop classic Rapper's Delight, "Cause I'ma get a fly girl, gonna get some spank, and drive off in a Def OJ." As Sugar Hill Gang was based in New Jersey, it's obvious how it could have reached Rick Rubin's vocabulary by the time he named Def Jam in 1985 from his dorm room at New York University. Although already popularized at this time, its presence in hip-hop grew as it became common slang. An example of its use is seen in the Beastie Boys track No Sleep Till Brooklyn, in which MCA raps, "I sip the Def ale with all my fly women." With Def's popularization occurring in New York, it only took a few years for Merriam-Webster to announce the addition of Def into its dictionaries, with them defining it as slang for cool. When Rubin found out that Def was added to dictionaries, he became inspired by the Summer of Love, a hippie congregation in the San Francisco neighborhood of High-Ashbury in 1967. At the end of the summer, as many of the Summer of Love's originators either returned to college or become discontent at the event's commercialization, a mock funeral known as the Death of the Hippie was held. In a 2009 interview with the New York Times, Rubin confirmed this as the death of Def's inspiration, when he stated that when advertisers in the fashion world co-opted the image of hippies, a group of the original hippies in San Francisco literally buried the image of the hippie. When Def went from street lingo to the mainstream, it defeated its purpose. Rubin believed that the defeat of the Summer of Love as a concept by becoming commercialized was in the same vein as the defeat of Def. On the day of the funeral, there were over 500 attendees, including Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Sir Mix-a-Lot at the Hollywood Memorial Park, a popular resting place for many celebrities and creatives. The Reverend Al Sharpton officiated the funeral after Rubin paid out of pocket to fly him out from New York. Sharpton stated that Def was more than excellent, like defiantly excellent with a bang. Now that Bang is out of death, it lost its exclusivity to the indefiant crowd. It died of terminal acceptance. My favorite part of the ordeal were the stand-in actors that Rubin paid to guard the altar, with the LA Times stating that they were beret-wearing Black Panthers standing guard with prop shotguns and AK-47s. I also loved Rubin's outfit, with it being described as a floor-length black cassock, Ray-Ban sunglasses, a white Sikh turban, and strands of red Hindu Rudraksha beads. It was an open casket funeral, as attendees were invited to bring memorabilia that had the word Def printed on it and place it inside the casket. After the memorabilia was sealed, Rubin had the casket loaded into a horse-drawn carriage that was apparently blaring Amazing Grace. When the casket was lowered into the gravesite, Sharpton proclaimed, "When we bury Def, we bury the urge to conform." After the burial of the deceased, Rubin reportedly hosted an after-party in LA's Koreatown at a bowling alley, which was attended by 2,000. What I just described was performance art. Rubin created performance art as symbolism for many things in his life. In order to make it understood that this was performance art, and not simply a joke by Rubin, his love for professional wrestling should be detailed. Rubin had stated in a 2015 Rolling Stone interview that he has had lifetime tickets since the 1970s. He cited Ric Flair and Tex McKenzie as some of his greatest influences in the way he both runs his labels and has done his producing. As an example for how it affected his work, Rubin adapted the wrestling heel, which is when a wrestler portrays a villain, into the hip-hop scene in the way he managed the early Beastie Boys portrayal in order to make them stand out more during their promotion for their first album. This love for the theatrics of professional wrestling perfectly translates to the death of Def in terms of tone and delivery. In 1993, Rubin was at a crossroads in his career, and the death of Def, and dropping Def in his imprint's name, was symbolic of him moving on from Def Jam, as he had left Def Jam years prior to form Def American Records, but even still, founding Def Jam was what he is known for. Former Def Jam executive Dan Charnas wrote that it was a healthy karmic break with the past, the shedding of the last bit of skin from his former life in New York. It was indeed a break from the past, as Rubin had moved to Los Angeles and was beginning to have a new career direction. Rubin had begun to produce for already established non-hip-hop artists, which he had not done during his time at Def Jam, as he had worked to establish groups such as Public Enemy and the Beastie Boys. Ultimately, the death of Def was just as much as a mock funeral and comedic piece of performance art as it was an announcement of Rubin's evolution.